All right, let's be honest. When you hear the phrase safe operating procedure, what pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's a dusty binder on a shelf, right? Just more paperwork. But I want you to completely reframe that idea today. We're not talking about some boring document. We're talking about a blueprint, a living, breathing plan for making your workplace safer, more efficient, and way more successful.
So let me ask you a question. What's the single most overlooked danger where you work? Is it the big machine in the corner? That one spot that always gets slippery? Maybe some chemical you have to handle? You know, those are all real risks for sure, but the biggest danger, the one that causes the most problems, is often something you can't see at all.
And there you have it. It's ambiguity. The real danger is just assuming that everyone knows the right way, the safe way, to do a job. A safe operational procedure, or an SOP as we'll call it, is the antidote. It replaces that dangerous assumption with a clear, step-by-step plan that everyone can follow.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to build that plan together. First, we'll talk about why you really, truly need these things. Then, we'll get into laying the foundation, getting the right people in the room. After that, we'll jump into a super simple 3-phase process to create one. And finally, we'll talk about how to make sure this blueprint actually gets used and doesn't end up collecting dust.
Okay, first step, why you really need SOPs. And here's the big idea. This is about moving way beyond just ticking a box for compliance. It's about building a real, genuine culture of safety.
So let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What is an SOP? At its heart, it's just a written document with step-by-step instructions on how to do a task safely. Think of it like a recipe. It's the playbook for getting a job done right and getting it done safely, every single time.
And the payoff here goes way beyond just covering your legal basis. A really good SOP actively cuts down on injuries, it makes everyone more aware of safety, and it just improves communication all around. It's not just about protection, it's also about performance. It gives managers a much clearer, unfiltered look at the actual risks their team is facing every day.
Which brings us right to our next section, laying the foundation. Because here's a secret, a great SOP doesn't start with writing. It starts with getting the right team and the right tools in place first.
So who actually writes this thing? This part is absolutely critical. It cannot be a manager sitting in an office who hasn't done the job in 5 years. The best person is someone with current, hands-on experience. And, this is a big one, they have to talk to the other people who do that job. That knowledge from the front lines, that's pure gold. Now, for really tricky stuff, yeah, bring in a technical expert. And it's always a good idea to have a safety coordinator look over everything to make sure it's consistent.
All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts, the how-to. We've broken down the whole creation process into 3 really clear, manageable phases. This is your step-by-step blueprint for getting it done.
Phase 1 is all about preparation. First, just get familiar with the goal. You want to write something that's clear and simple. Next, identify all the critical tasks in your operation. You can't do it all at once, so then you prioritize. Use a risk assessment to figure out which tasks are the most hazardous and start there. And finally, and this is so important, you deconstruct each of those tasks into tiny, bite-sized steps.
And here's what deconstruct actually looks like in the real world. It's not just go get an item from the warehouse. No, it's broken down into specific actions. Look at these details. Keep a proper lookout. Approach by a designated walkway. Only pick 2 items at a time. Every one of those tiny steps is there for a reason, to prevent a specific risk, whether that's a collision with a forklift or a back injury from lifting too much.
Okay, once you have all those tiny steps mapped out, you're ready for phase 2, drafting and hazard control. Now, for every single one of those little steps you just listed, you got to put on your detective hat. You investigate all the possible hazards, you figure out a way to control each one, and then you can finally write that first draft and send it out for people to look at.
And you know, finding these hazards isn't some kind of magic. It really just comes down to asking the right questions. Simple stuff like, could someone's sleeve get caught in that machine? Is there a trip hazard over here? Is it bright enough to see what you're doing? Asking these direct questions forces you to look at the workplace in a whole new, safety-first way.
So, you've found a hazard. What now? You control it. And to do that, we use something called the hierarchy of control. It's a really simple but powerful way to think. You always start at the top and work your way down. First question, can you just get rid of the hazard completely, eliminate it? If not, okay, can you isolate it? Put a barrier between it and people? If you can't do that, can you engineer a solution, like adding a machine guard? The very last resort, always, is just trying to reduce exposure with things like PPE.
And that brings us to the final phase, implementation and review. Look, The document is written, but the job is not done, not even close. It needs to get a final sign-off and be posted where people can actually see it. It needs version numbers and review dates. But most importantly, people have to be trained on it, tested, and supervised to make sure they're actually following it. This whole thing has to be a living process.
Which leads us perfectly into our final section, making it all stick. How do you take this piece of paper and turn it into something people do every single day? Something that actually keeps them safe?
If you remember just one thing from our time together, please make it this. An SOP is a living document. It is not a file-it-and-forget-it task. The second you treat it that way, it becomes totally useless. It has to grow and change right along with your workplace.
So when do you review it? Well, think of these as triggers. A worker comes to you with a concern? That's a trigger. You have an incident or even a close call? Major trigger. You get new equipment or change a process? That's a trigger. And even if none of that happens, you still have to put it on the calendar for a regular review, usually every year or two, just to make sure nothing has been missed.
Let's just ground this in reality for a second. This tiny detail from an SOP about cleaning a deep fryer shows you the power of being specific. It doesn't just say use a container. It says use the designated metal container marked for hot oil use. That one simple, crystal clear instruction removes any guesswork, and that's the kind of detail that can literally prevent a life-changing injury.
And that's what this is all about, really. An SOP isn't just another document. It's a commitment. It's a promise that a company makes to its people, saying your safety is our #1 priority. It is the blueprint for a workplace that's not only safe, but because it's safe, it's successful.
So, I'll leave you with a final thought, a question to take with you. After everything we've just talked about, what's the first safety blueprint you're going to write or maybe review in your workplace?